This video is part of the training series for the Cloud VMS software by Vending Zoo. Now in this video we are going to walk through the process of manually loading ePort data into your cloud software. There's an automated process that can load the ePort data for you, but this video will be going through the manual process. Now actually loading the ePort data manually is in and of itself a very fast and simple thing to do, and it only takes a few mouse clicks. But for this video we're going to go into a little bit more detail about the background of how the data gets loaded and what happens as it's loaded and what then you can do with it once you do get it loaded. So let's start with some background information. The ePort data is the transactional data that is coming from the ePort devices in your machines. Now those devices have no idea what product is vending. They have no idea where they are, and they have no idea how much product is left in the machine. The only thing they know is at a certain date and time, money, either cash or credit, came into the machine and a certain motor in the machine was activated. And that's really all they know. Now your Toucan software knows where your machines are, and it knows what products are in those machines and what coils those products are in. And Toucan also knows how much product is in each of those coils, because that's information that you supplied. So Toucan is able to take that e-data, the electronic data that is being sent from your card reader, and link it up to build that transaction service history for you and tell you how much revenue is coming in, how much product is left in your machines, and when transactions are taking place. Also what the best selling and worst selling products are for each of your machines. So let's go through how all of this works. Now, first of all, you created your machines in your software. And as you created those machines, you specified what the ePort serial number was for each one of those machines. You may not have known what the locations were at that point in time, but you were able to create machines and set them up even though you didn't have locations yet for them, and you had the ePort serial number information. So you create your machine list. Then as locations come in, you're able to go back into Toucan and create those locations in your cloud. And it's information like the address, phone, any notes about that location, basic location information. Once you have those locations created, then you can go in and create working locations, which are simply locations that have machines at them that are actively turning transactions. So when you create your working locations, you are specifying which machine is at which location. And that is the background information that you need in order for your electronic data, your e-data, to have something to link to. If you remember from the tutorial on creating working locations, anytime you create a working location, it begins to build a service history for you for that machine at that location. And it's that service history that the ePort data will link to as you load it. Alright, to help make more sense of this, let's actually go into the data that I have set up in here, and we will actually load some ePort data. So let's go look at my machine list. So in my list of machines here, I've got 4 machines. Now 3 of them, these first 3, are located. So I've got a location name by those machines. So they're located, and I have 1 machine in here that's not located. Looks like all 4 machines are active. All 4 machines have their device ID set, and 3 of them are located. So there's our machine list. Incidentally, when I created the machines, I just named them new machine 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then as I located them and was able to physically go to the machine to verify which machine it was that was located by looking at the ePort serial number for that physical machine, then I was able to come back in here and I just renamed my machines with a new name when I knew the location that they were at. Totally legal to do that. Then in my location list, I have 4 locations. Looks like 3 of them are active and 1 of them is not active. So I have an old location here that I no longer have machines at. I'll probably eventually delete it, but for right now I just have it inactive. And then I have 3 locations that are active. Okay, let's go look at our working locations. So in my working location list, I've got 2 locations, Air Force One and Lisa's Owl House. So I've got 2 locations where I have machines. So I've got 3 machines out in the field, and Lisa's Owl House has 2 of them. Air Force One has 1. Okay, now we know that whenever we create a new location, or whenever we come in and we edit a new location, a working location. When we edit a working locations, we're doing this when we record that we go out and we filled or restocked the machine. We put the date and time that we filled the machine up, and then we go through and indicate which coils we filled up and how much current product we put in those coils in our current fill. So that's how we tell Toucan, here's this machine, here's when we were out there last, and here's what we did to it. We replaced these products and we filled these coils up, and this is the level of product in those coils. Every time we do this and we save that information, Toucan keeps track of that history for us, and that service history begins to build. So let's look at a service history for one of these locations. Let's look at Air Force One first. So we'll search for that location in our service history, and I get 1 row back. It's coming from Toucan, and it's the 1 row that got created when we added Air Force One and this machine as a working location. Let's look at Lisa's Owl House. Let's search for that. Okay, and we just have 2 rows in here, 1 for each one of the machines. So just like with Air Force One, these 2 rows got created when we added these machines as new working locations to Lisa's Owl House. So if I clear this search and just search everything, pull everything back, the only thing we have in our history at this point is the record of when we originally created the working location. That's all that we need, so that as ePort data begins to get loaded, it will have something to attach to. And what's important, or the takeaway from that, is when we load this ePort data, those ePort transactions are going to come in here to the service history. Look through our service history to figure out when was the most recent time that we were at that machine in the context of that date and time of that transaction. In other words, for Air Force One, as we load the data, any transactions that came after August 5th will look to this service record to figure out what was in the machine at that point in time, so that it can record that transaction for that coil and compute our machine inventory for us. Okay, so now that we've got that background information of what's currently in our database or in our cloud, let's go through how to load our ePort data into our cloud. That's going to happen here in our eData Tools section. Let's go ahead and open this up. So under eData Tools, we have Load ePort CSV Files. Okay, again, we talked about this is the manual process for loading this data. So we should be getting an email, a daily email from USA Technologies that has this transactional data. So let's jump out of Toucan for just a minute and go into email here and see what that should look like. So if we open up our email, we should have all these emails coming in from USA Technologies, and we should have about 2 every day. So we should be getting a sales activity by batch report. This is an HTML report. And then we should also be getting a transline item report, and it ends with .csv. It just stands for comma separated values. Okay, let's look at a sales activity by batch. This is the HTML report, and this is one that is human readable. You can open this one up and it'll show you the activity from the previous day's transactions. And you can read that, and it is easy to read. Let's go look at the transline item email. So we'll open up that email, and we have as our attachment this transline item.csv file. There's a bunch of numbers in here. Basically, as part of those numbers, you will see the date. So there's 2016 12/03, and this is the time that it came in. So normally you never need to look at this file. All you need to do is just download it and save it somewhere to your computer. But to satisfy curiosity, I'm going to go ahead and open it up. So we'll go ahead and click on it. And this is what it looks like. It's basically, well, it is the exact same information that's in that sales by batch activity report. Only it's not quite as human readable. It's just a bunch of numbers and dates and some other things that are in here. So it's not as easily human readable, but it is in a format that you can load very easily into your cloud. So like I said, usually you never have to go into this file and look at this, and you certainly don't want to ever open it up or change this data. The only thing you need to do with it is just download it. So every browser is different the way that it downloads. So I'm in Chrome right now, and all I need to do is just kind of put my mouse over the top of it, and I'll get these two buttons. I can save it to the drive, or I can download it. I'm going to go ahead and choose download. And when I do that, I get a dialog box that pops up and asks me, where do you want to download it? Now what I've done is on my computer's hard drive, I have a folder that I just named transline item, and inside of transline item I have two other folders, an in and a processed. Now you can do this any way that makes sense to you. You can have an in and an out folder, or you could just have one folder called transline item or ePort data, whatever you want to call it. So you just figure out a method that works for you. So for me, I created transline item, and I have an in folder. And I'm going to save all of my transline item attachments that I get to that in folder. Then after I load them, I'll go in and move them from in into processed. And then I can easily tell which ones I haven't loaded yet and which ones I already have. So we'll go ahead and save this. And that's how you download that transline item file. So it's downloaded now. If we go and look at our hard drive, I'm in that transline item folder, and here's where I've got my in and my process. So here's all of the files that I've downloaded but I haven't processed yet into the cloud. And then here are the ones that I have processed. Okay, I'm a little behind. I need to get caught up here. Okay, so now that I've downloaded the attachments to my hard drive, we can go back into Toucan, and under our eData Tools section, we can go to our Load ePort CSV files here. So we'll go ahead and click on that, and this is the screen that I get. So the first thing I need to do is just say choose the files that I'm going to download, or that I'm not going to download, but rather choose the files that I'm going to load into the cloud. So I'll say choose files, and I get a dialog box that opens up, and this is where I would navigate it and point it to wherever I have downloaded those files on my hard drive. So in my case, I'm going into my transline item in folder, and then my files show up for me right here. Okay, now I can load multiple files at one time. So here is a file that starts 2016 on August 10th. So I'll pick that one, and I'm actually going to load a month's worth of data so that we have some real good history to kind of work with. So I'll go down here to the 9th, and I will load everything from August. So I'm going to hold my shift key down on my keyboard and click that bottom one there, and what Windows does is highlights everything in between. So everything that's highlighted is what is going to get loaded into my Toucan software. Okay, this brings up a good question of how often should I manually load this data? And that again is a personal preference. So you can load that every day if you want, or you can do it once a week if you want. I wouldn't wait longer just as a rule of thumb, longer than a week, unless you go on vacation and you're gone for a month and you come back and need to load a month's worth of data. Usually about every day or once a week, load your transactional data to update your cloud. So I'll do this month's worth and I'll click open. Now when I click open, what Toucan is doing is it is doing a lot of work actually. It is going through every single file that I had highlighted, and it's picking out all of the transactions from each one of those files, and then it displays it here in my screen. Now at this point nothing has happened yet. All Toucan has done has gone into those files and pulled the information out for me, so now I can kind of see what it is, but I haven't loaded any of it yet. It's just displaying for me, hey, here's what was in all of those files that you just selected. So there's all the data, months worth of data in all of these files. Okay, so what happens when I click process files? If I scroll down here to the bottom of this screen, I've got two buttons, a process files button and a clear files button. Now the clear files button, if I click that, it's going to just reset this screen for me and get rid of all this data so that I could choose new files to load if I wanted to. When I click process files, Toucan is going to go through every single one of these transactions, all this data, and it's going to link everything up for me. So basically what will happen is it has the device ID right here. This device ID is the ePort serial number. That's what came in the file. Now when I created my machines back in my machine list, I indicated what the serial number was of the ePort for that machine. So for every one of those transactions that comes in, Toucan is going to come into my machine list and find that machine based on that serial number, that device ID. Now once it's identified the machine based on that serial number for the ePort, now it knows which machine that is. Now that it knows which machine it is, it knows if and where that machine is located. Now that it has that machine location, it can go into the history, and for that machine's location in the history, it now can look at all of the coils for the particular date and time that that transaction took place to know what products were in the machine and how much product were in those coils on that particular date and time. And then it's able to link all of that data up. So that is what happens when we click this process files button down here at the bottom. Let's go ahead and click it. It is going to make Toucan do quite a bit of work, but that's okay. That's why we have computers. So this is a month's worth of data, and it's actually processing through and linking up all of that data and gives me this little progress indicator. So as soon as that is gone, then we'll know that Toucan is done going through all of these transactions for us. Okay, so it's finished up, and that's what it looks like. Now it's done. So it has processed all that data. Now, a logical question is, what happens if I accidentally load the same files again? Or if I accidentally click that button multiple times? Well, Toucan can see what the file name is where that data came from, and it stores the file names that it has already loaded. So when I click this process files button, it will look to see if I've already loaded that file or not. And if I have already loaded it, it will skip that file and go on to the next one. So as long as I don't change the file names, as long as I don't mess with that data in the file, Toucan will know that those transactions have already been processed. If I completely rename that file and save it as a new file and load the new file, then Toucan could potentially load that data twice. So I'm going to click this process files button again, and what should happen is Toucan should skip everything. So let's click it, and that was much quicker. So pretty certain that Toucan did not load those twice. It was able to figure out as it went through that data that those files had already been loaded. So Okay, once it's done, now we can verify what happened and what loaded by going into our raw eData screen. So let's go ahead and go into raw eData. So I'll go ahead and click that. Now the raw eData screen is one of the few search screens that does not automatically retrieve back the data for you. And that's because it will pull back a lot of data. So if you accidentally retrieve everything that you've ever loaded for like an entire year, it might be a little while it's retrieving all that information. If you're on a slow internet connection, that could take a while. So instead, it lets you enter some criteria like location. So now we could look at a location and look at Air Force One and retrieve that back. So there is the data that it retrieved back from Air Force One. And it gives us our status indicator over here. So what's processed and what's unlinked. So let's kind of walk through what the difference is. If it's processed, then that means that Toucan was able to find that machine. It found that machine and it found where that machine was located, and it was able to figure out what product was in that coil for that machine on that particular date and time. And it was able to link all that information up. So those are the ones that are processed. Unlinked records like this one right here, I'll just check it so that it highlights it. We can see it was able to figure out the location, it was able to figure out the machine, but it wasn't able to figure out what product was in that machine. So this is coil E4 for this machine, Air Force One. So if we go to our working location where Air Force One is and look at the coils in that machine, we do not have an E4 at all. So maybe what happened is I added the entree unit to this machine and I forgot to come into Toucan and record those new coils that made up the entree unit. So since that information wasn't in the history, Toucan wasn't able to link that up, and it lets us know that by telling us that it's just unlinked. So in our raw eData area, we can use the search capabilities to quickly see everything that isn't linked up. So if I clear that and say I just want to see everything that is unlinked and retrieve that back, now I can see everything that is unlinked. So we notice that we've got these E4 and E9 coils. We know why they didn't link up because I don't have those coils in the machine. All these that didn't link up, there's no location, machine, or product for those. And that's because this device ID does not exist in my machine list. If I look at my machine list, I don't have any machines with that device serial number. So that's why those didn't link up. So the takeaway is, after you've loaded your ePort data, you can come into your raw eData section and you can actually see the data that loaded and see what linked and what didn't link up. Alright, now that we've loaded the data and things are linking up, let's go look at that service history. Let's go back into our service history screen and let's look at the service history for Air Force One. So we'll search for Air Force One. Okay, now we see there's the one row that we had before that was created when we made this working location, and now we have these green rows. These green rows are what came in from the ePort. So this is the ePort data that was loaded, and we have a month's worth of it. We can see the events, we can see the cash and the credit, and some other information that it gives us here in our history. Now that we have some history, some ePort data history linked into our machines, now we can use some things like our raw revenue report. Now the raw revenue report queries that electronic data directly for me, but it groups it into location, machine, and products, so it makes it a nice way to quickly see how a particular location is doing based just on that eData that I have been loading. So for example, I can give it a date range and I can say I just want to look at a week's worth of data. So let's go look at a week's worth of that data that we just loaded. So we'll go from the 10th to the 17th, and then I will say generate report. And what this report will do is Toucan will go out and find all of the transactions that meet this criteria and fall within that date range, and then it will pull that back and group it together for me. So all of my unlinked stuff will show up here at the top, and then as we scroll down we can see each location and the machine and the products within that machine. So we can see all of our unlinked products and see each one of the products. Now as you can see, this is a lot of data that comes back, and it can be a little overwhelming to look at it. So what I'm going to do to make it a little easier is click this collapse all button. And when I click that, Toucan goes through and kind of groups everything and collapses it up into a specific location. So now at this point we could go into a location and see all of the products for a specific machine at a location. So if we go into Lisa's Owl House, for example, I can see that for all of the machines at Lisa's Owl House, I sold a total of 135 items. So that's all the machines combined, with a combined revenue of around $150. But then if I expand Lisa's Owl House, now I can see each machine, and I can see how each machine is doing and the revenue and items sold from each of the machines. And then I can expand a specific machine to see the products for that machine, and even just expand specific products to see the actual ePort transactions for that product. Then of course I can export this out to Excel, and I'm just going to put this on the desktop. We'll say it's raw revenue for August. I'll replace the one I already have there, and then we'll open it up, and we get a nice spreadsheet with the same information. Now Excel does not have the collapse and expanding capability, so we get everything expanded in Excel, but we do get it here in a spreadsheet so that we can then use our spreadsheet skills if we want to further do some analysis on this data. Some of the other things that we have at our disposal is the raw eData screen itself is a good analysis tool. For example, if you get a phone call and somebody says that their credit card was charged multiple times, or that they got charged but no product was vended, you could come in and query for a specific card. So you could ask them, what are the first 4 digits of the card or the last 4 digits of the card, and put that information in, and then tell Toucan that this is, I'm looking for any card that ends with those numbers, and we can query for that, and we'll get back those transactions, and we can see the dates that the transactions took place, so we can work with customers to see when they purchased something and maybe it didn't vend. And what this will give us is a very quick way to search through our ePort data, through that raw data, and we have access to the transaction number, so we can use that and use USA Technology's website. So if we needed to refund this transaction, we could do that fairly easily. Likewise, any of the, we'll clear this criteria, we'll just pull everything back. Everything is queryable. You have the full search capabilities and functionalities and powers of the search bar, and you can also group by anything in the raw eData screen as well. So for example, if I wanted to group by location, I just click my location header and I can drag it here into this group area here at the top and drop it, and now everything is grouped by the location, and everything that doesn't have a location, that was unlinked, shows up here at the top, and then the ones that were linked together show up in their groups, so that I can kind of make this screen show me what I need to see and kind of group things the way I would like to group them, and also export this out to Excel. And as I do, Toucan will maintain the groupings that I specify inside of the raw eData screen. So we have our unlinked locations, and we have our locations grouped together as well in an Excel format that we can now work with. So that's going to conclude this video on how to load our ePort data, and a little bit of background about what happens when that ePort data gets loaded, and then a little bit about what you can do once you get that ePort data loaded, and some analysis tools that you have at your disposal. Thank you.